This episode is called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles because all of those were involved in the making of this chapter and in the making of the trip that really helped to define my marriage with. If you've been following us, you know the story of the Chinese Lantern Festival. That was kind of the last bookend in the series of kind of my decision, my emotional development, my emotional reckoning with the relationship that we had. This was the first bookend and the 3 years kind of in between there. So in the summer of 2023, we were just coming out of COVID. We had been kind of locked in our homes with each other, doing homeschool, working remotely. Our lives had been upended. And that would understandably shift any relationship, even one that was built on, a 20-year foundation of stone, not one that was, 4 years old or so, as mine was with kind of in that situation. And it had just become too much. I couldn't take just the constant management, we'll say. It was very difficult to be around him day in and day out because he was the dog was scratching the couch too harshly, and I needed to fix that kind of as an example. And I just kind of realized that I wasn't happy and I wasn't doing him or myself any favors being in a relationship where I wasn't happy because you're not able to give your full self. And his daughter from a previous marriage, she was living with us full time at that time. And that was her choice. And I really respected her bravery to make that choice and take that action. And I loved the opportunity because I lived there. I got to live with her full time. But I was so unhappy at that point that I actually drafted divorce papers and gave them to. And I wasn't doing anything spectacular. I wasn't trying to create the saga that we're in now of our divorce. I just wanted out. I just wanted out of the relationship that I felt was unhealthy for me, of the relationship that I felt didn't have any upward momentum, that I just didn't feel needed to exist anymore. I don't want to say it had run its course because that would imply that it had a course to begin with, but it had just reached a natural point where I just kind of couldn't do it anymore. And if you listen to some of our other episodes, you'll hear, I no longer went on vacations with Brian after this time because I just couldn't stand to be around him in close contained spaces. And now I know we can all get on each other's nerves. We all have quirks, we all have ticks. This is not a knock on that at all. It is just that I had reached a point where I had decided his ticks, his quirks, his nuances were just not things I could tolerate on a daily basis, to say nothing in, 300 square foot, yeah, containments of, vacation type areas. So I did, share with him divorce papers. I just gone online and typed them in and filled. And I was like, hey, all we got to do is sign this. I'll take it down to the court. We'll go through the process. Like, I'm not trying to call your mama fat. I'm not trying to say you were bad in bed. I'm not trying to do nothing. I'm just trying to get out. And he was very understandably like shocked by this, as anyone would be, I mean, and then years later, the shoe was on the other foot and he was the one telling me we were getting divorced and I was shocked. So I totally can resonate with that emotion. But at that same time, we were also kind of transitioning our family. So I think kind of like all people, you have a save the marriage baby. I had a save the marriage move. Our daughter was growing up. She was going to start driving. I didn't feel it was safe just from a like logistics configuration perspective in our current neighborhood, to say nothing of the fact that I was outside at night a lot with our German Shepherd and his IBS, bless it. So I saw these guys like creeping around all the time in our neighborhood. They would roll down the road because that neighborhood, the houses were on kind of smaller lots close to the road. Great for trick or treating, also great for thefts. Thieves who want to come through and kind of check the cars in the driveway to see who forgot to lock their car that day. Or, oh, is there a house that's maybe no one's home? Is the back door open? And so with being outside with Apollo at night, I got to see a lot of this activity, to the point where I'd wave at, hey boys, you having a good night? Are you, has it been successful? So my car was actually one that got, I don't want to say broken into because I had forgotten to lock it, but still life be lifing. Okay. Having to remember to lock your car off everything else. Like, come on. I wanted to park in a garage because the way our garage was, you could get one car in it if and you definitely couldn't have anything around it. And since we were coming out of COVID, we had turned the garage into a gym, I think, as a lot of people did. So anyway, it was just kind of a natural pace. We were at a natural transition time in our family to make a move. So that's how we started. So the beginning of 2023, we hired a lady who was an angel from God who came into our house 40 hours a week. Y'all, this is how tragic it was. She came 40 hours a week for 5 months. Yes. To help organize and purge and sort and just get things ready. We didn't know where we were moving. We didn't have a house picked out yet, but we just knew that our family was kind of at a natural time to move. And I was absolutely driving this. Was more than happy to stay in the house he'd been in since sand was created because the mortgage was 3 cents a month and it really worked well for him. But I just really strongly felt like our family needed something different for this season in life, i.e. a garage. But then also I wanted to have the party house. Jane was getting bigger. She was having more friends. I wanted to be the house that people came to selfishly. So I could still be around her and her friends and kind of be a part of the party, but also I could kind of keep better watch that way versus her going to someone's house out and wherever. And I don't know who, and this isn't dissing anyone, y'all. I'm just being completely honest and selfish here that I didn't have to worry about her going somewhere else and then worry what's happening at that house, what's happening that I'm not that I'm a great, babysitter and that things didn't happen at our house, but it just made me feel better. And so I really wanted to kind of create, and also I think as a kid, you want to be the one that has the party house. You want to be the one that has the house that friends want to come to. I did not have the party house when I was in high school. And I don't want to say I was envious, but I definitely wish I could have experienced the journey of having a party house. So those all kind of contributed to us looking for, something bigger, something different. And then he really did get on board after we started really looking through the different components. We started talking through the financial options of renting the house that he currently had. And that was his house from a previous life. And I will give him credit. When we got married, he did come to me, someone who squeaks when they walk. I always tell the story honest and raw. The segments of it that are messed up, I'm going to tell you that. And the segments of it that I think he really did right. I'd be remiss if I didn't include those. So as we got married in 2018, he asked me, he goes, do you want to sell this house and get one that's just fresh, like that doesn't have old memories, that doesn't have all this? And then I was the one who was like, no, we're going to pay a realtor a commission to sell it. We're going to have to then buy at the current market interest rates. And I started kind of going through all of these things. And I'm not an emotional person and definitely not when it comes to houses. So it didn't bother me that his ex had slept with him in the bedroom that we're sleeping in. It didn't bother me that they'd had Thanksgiving in the dining room. None of that bothered me. It was just a house. It was just a roof. So I did not take him up on that offer when we first got married. And as we've gone through, I also didn't push to have his house refinanced in my name or Abby because I felt things are legit. We're married. There are like protections in that. I don't need to go through and line item and highlight and da da da. Well, that's a separate podcast. We go into those details, but yes, I probably should have taken him up on his offer to get a new house. But at the time, it just didn't seem necessary. It didn't seem like it was relevant for our family funds to do something like that. And also, my work was a little shaky at that time because I was doing marketing that really, really hinged on in-person engagement, which wasn't happening. COVID came very quickly after we were married. And so that shifted a lot of that dynamic. And I was then worried about my position in the family, my ability to contribute any money compared to he'd been in tech a long time. He had risen in the ranks. He was an executive. He was making it, man. And so I just didn't feel like I could kind of put my stake in the barrel and say, yes, I can do, a bigger bite than this. And so as we were looking through houses, that was kind of my save the marriage step. I then also kind of start seeing Our Lady who was getting things put in boxes. And I thought, this would be a really good time to leave. Everything has been sorted. Everything's been boxed and cataloged. It would be a very clean from a logistics standpoint for instead of us as a family moving into another house and Jane moving into a house that better fit them or not, stay where they are, and me moving somewhere that kind of was a better fit for me. And that's what ultimately prompted that summer me to draft the online divorce papers and share them with and to his credit, after we kind of talked about it and things were digested, he really leaned in. He really leaned into trying to be a fun, spontaneous partner who wasn't just rigid is the only word that comes to mind, kind of what the engagement with him felt like as a partner. It was very rigid. It wasn't fluid, wasn't spontaneous. I didn't feel like I could ever truly be myself because I wasn't sure how he in his rigidness would receive the full me live and living color that I think a lot of y'all have learned, just over the time with the podcast and the books. So he said, hey, let's go on a trip. Let's go on vacation. And I had already was hesitant about vacationing with him because of the week in the elf bed, which is a different episode, and some other vacations we'd had. But I said, you know what? We've hit this point. He's really trying to lean in. I need to lean into. I need to, try to meet him where he is with our relationship. So we agreed to go visit some friends he had in the Northeast. And I say the Northeast because that's when planes, trains, and automobiles happen. I knew that we were flying. And of course, because, needed to save every penny he ever earned to later divorce me with. We had to fly the cheap airline. And I knew that. I knew that going in. I had no expectations of first class. I had no expectations. I truly expected to be like strapped to a wing. But I was excited that he wanted to kind of try to lean in and do this trip. And I wanted to go to the TWA hotel at JFK. I'd seen it online on YouTube and it just seemed really cool. And I liked the 60s style of it. I liked how they had the board that does the little, it just seemed like a really cool thing. I was like, okay, it's not something that Jane would ever want to do. So us going on a trip by ourselves, it just seemed like a great opportunity to stop. And again, I'm thinking Northeast. I'm thinking, okay, we'll fly into JFK, spend a night in the hotel, which is right there because it was a terminal, get that experience because I'm sure it was like $1 million a night, so I knew more than one night was more than I could ask for. And then get on another plane and fly to this Northeast location. That's where I learned that no, because of this, that, and the other in the orbit of the moon, we're going to have to take the train. I'm sorry, the train? I honestly didn't know trains still existed. I knew that was how we transported cattle and like groceries, across the country, but I didn't know that or like in New York and major metropolitan areas, I knew they had subways, metros, trains like that. But I just didn't know training, if that's the word, was a thing. And so for long distance kind of thing, I thought you fly. And so thank goodness I had packed light. It was just my carry-on bag. And he had his carry-on bag. And so we then start navigating. It's not like I had checked luggage and I had a personal item and, a stuffed neck pillow and everything else. The thing is, I was kind of a compact unit. So we start traversing through all these different and train stations, y'all. If it's been a while since you trained, they are not like airports. They do not have, not all of them have escalators. They do not have, the moving sidewalks. It is you are schlepping what you packed. Okay. So I kind of blacked out a little bit just for self-preservation, but so the details are a little hazy, but it was just a lot of carrying my bag up concrete steps, getting on another train, the little conductor guy coming by, checking our ticket, and thank God knew how all that worked because I had no idea how to do that. I would have gotten kicked off the train or they would thought I was a spy or I was smuggling something because I was like, I don't know etiquette here. So we ended up kind of navigating around and I truly blacked out 3 or 4 transfers on the train. And as we're making these transfers, all I could think about was, this is really showing my age, but there was a Discover card commercial where they were talking about when you call your credit card company, you often get the runaround. And they're like, transfer. Oh, if we need to transfer you to this department. Oh, we got to transfer you to this department. And so they did a joke about it, where on the call, they're like, transfer. And every time we would kind of transfer our trade or our means of transportation, I thought, transfer. So we finally get there and his sweet friends pick us up in their car, planes, trains, and automobiles. Pick us up in their car, bring us to their super cute house. It was from, I really think that like Christopher Columbus stayed in their house, like on his first night in the New World. He's like, oh, magically there's a house here. And they had redone it just kind of bit by bit. It was so sweet and so charming. And it was so nice after just kind of that event. And, being neurodivergent, it was really hard for me to deal with that level of just stimuli for so many hours. And also, too, not knowing really where we were going, what we were doing, because I hadn't planned the trip. I had, kind of given over that leadership to him. So we finally get there and I'm like, oh, thank you. We're here. This is gorgeous. And we had our own kind of like, I don't want to say cabin, but it was one of their buildings on the property. So we weren't staying in the house with them. So we had our own privacy, which is always nice. Because then you can fart and you don't worry about if they fart or, all that kind of stuff. Y'all don't act like you have those same thoughts. Okay. Or if you take a poo, you're like, oh my God, did they smell my poop? Okay. We're all human. Okay. So it was very nice to have that separate space and to get to hang out with them because they're super cool people. And that's where I learned about pour over coffee. I do another short on pour over coffee, but it's just nice to go to meet new people, be in their environment and learn kind of what they like in life. And I was glad that they shared how to make pour over coffee with me because that's something I have taken ever since that trip. But on that trip, we were also in the same process. Don't forget, parallel, 2 things can be true at one time. We were still moving forward with looking for a new house because at this point, had really bought on to the idea. We were moving, we were leaning into our relationship. Like, okay, the gears were kind of really coming together now. And so we were in the final stages. We were trying to get a house beside my parents, Reverie House. And I know that name, will be familiar to y'all. And I do a whole chapter just on Reverie House and how that came to be. So I won't go on down that rabbit hole, but we weren't able to purchase Reverie House primarily because it wasn't for sale. Minor inconvenience, right? How do you buy a house that's not for sale? But obviously we worked through it. And so we were then looking at another house that was very similar, but just still not the same. Some things, and even though I mentioned earlier, I'm not one to really get into houses and that I had a thing for Reverie House. And Jane did too. So much so that when we were gone on that trip, we asked our realtor, hey, things are moving kind of quickly. We want Jane to feel included. We don't want her to feel like we're moving all these chess pieces behind the scnes. We really want her to feel, please take her to the house that we are going to put earnest money down on, that we're going to put a contract in on. So the realtor, bless it, came and picked her up from tennis, brought her to look at the house. And Jane was like, I ain't looking at this house. Part of me was like, girl, be cool, play along. And the other part of me was like, don't knock it, because I got that same salt in my veins. So I get it, girl. But she just did not even care to entertain, to look at this house, to see where her room might be, or see where she might kind of arrange her furniture, or just the neighborhood, if she knew anyone, because as far as she was concerned, she wasn't moving there. She was moving to Reverie House. And at that time, I had exhausted all efforts of getting Reverie. And I was like, you know what, God, it's in your hands. I have put every square peg in every round hole, and I have duct taped over it, and I've caulked it, and it ain't holding. This ship ain't floating. And so I was like, hey, we got to move forward. So we're kind of at that place, and it was nice to get away from all that headache of spending the last 5 months having someone in our house 40 hours a week, packing and organizing and all that. So we'd gotten past that chapter. We'd gotten past the chapter of kind of picking a new house and kind of what we were going to do, and accepting that we weren't going to get the one we wanted. And also, too, kind of both just really taking a pause and focusing on our relationship and leaning in. So it was a very unique time in our marriage. And it was nice to be in this really beautiful location in this cottage where we were by ourselves versus, having any outside influence. That was also the last time that we had sex, was on that trip. And I remember very much like the night that Coco killed herself. The moon was so bright that night that it really put that hallmark in my mind on that memory. And this night was very similar to that. Our room was on the second floor of their detached barn. And I remember I'd hung out with his friend. We'd had a great evening. We'd had wine. I was super relaxed. I felt like all these big lifts were behind me and things were really clicking along. And I was like, okay, so go in. And as it's happening, he's frowning. Now, I am not someone who can frown. I can try. I don't know if I did it, but he had just that natural ability and could frown just on command. So frowning, I say this to say that frowning was not unheard of for his face to be able to do. But to frown during sex just really did a dagger to me, y'all. And I was like, here I am. I'm trying to work through all these things. I'm really trying to lean in, and you're frowning. And it broke a piece in me. And I can't describe it any other way. So, we would kind of get done from that trip, and I won't even, in the book, I go into the details of our stay at the TWA hotel and kind of just what a letdown that was, because it was clear that I had communicated what I wanted to do at the TWA hotel, and he had his own agenda of what we were going to do at the TWA hotel. And those two things were not aligned. And his agenda is the agenda. There is no compromise. There is no hearing you out. You're going to do what you're going to do. And so that stop at the hotel really was a letdown, because in my mind, it was going to be this very romantic, very nice trip. And it just became what he wanted it to be. Now, I will say he is a tremendous photographer, y'all. If you can find his work online and check it out, you will be truly impressed. I love so many of the photos that I have from that chapter of life. And actually, the photo that gets the most traction, that y'all love the most, is the one of me in the pool on the rooftop there. I love it too. It's gorgeous. I mean, he's truly as talented, but even that part of the story has a negative story on it that all just kind of compounded together. We got back from the trip, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, I don't want to do this. Like, I felt this pressure. I felt this I've got to make a decision now while we're moving. And we had already put the contract in on the other house. We were already moving forward that I was like, I need to be moving out. I need to use this last weekend, this getaway weekend didn't work. Not that it's reasonable to think that a getaway weekend will, I mean, Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt taught us, y'all, because they went on that vacation before they got divorced. They're like, it ain't going to fix it, girl. But I still had that hope. I still had that just because we'd already so far, we'd already had so many years. I say so many years, but we'd already had a lot of life together that I really had hope that this trip to the Northeast would fix things for us. And so kind of coming back at home and realizing that it didn't and that we were in the same spot that we were in before. And in fact, in many ways, it solidified any doubt that, okay, we're not having good sex at home. We can't have good sex on vacation. Like, where does that leave a relationship? Just being real. All my professionals are on here listening. You're like, girl, you're speaking truth here because relationships have so many layers. And one of those layers is intimacy. And so, yes, that intimacy begins outside the bedroom, and that's super important. But then there's intimacy in the bedroom as well. And so you need that so that you can build this foundation and this trust and this bond with your life partner. It's just part of the deal, yo. Okay. I wouldn't be being honest and true if I didn't talk about it like that. So we came back, came to my parents' house and I was like, hey, I got to do it. I've already kind of softballed it to him by showing him the papers I printed online and was just like, basically sign here, 2 copies. We've gone on our trip. We've kind of tried. It's just, it's not working. And I want to be honest as we're making this move. And my mom just really hit me with it. She said, because his daughter, was living with us full time. And she says, you've all committed to this family. You've all committed to this journey together, especially Jane. The youngest one had to do the bravest thing in order. All and I had to do was get married. We were grown adults and could do that. But she had really put herself out there and been brave beyond what her age should have dictated in order for her to be in our life full time. And she and did not have a good relationship as we did. I mean, there was a lot of just conflict. Anything that you would have in a narcissist kind of toxic house is what we were experiencing. And so my mom just put it to me straight. She's like, Jane committed to this family, to this relationship, to this journey with you. How do you think it looks to her if you just bail out and abandon her? And to say nothing of you're now leaving her alone without having you as a buffer, as a filter. And that just hit me in just the depths of my soul because I didn't want her to think at that age, I didn't want to create thoughts in her mind that she wasn't enough. I didn't want to create thoughts in her mind that she had done something to cause the end of this relationship. I didn't want her to have to experience life. And I say without me, not in an arrogant way, but I knew there were things I could teach her and coach her and guide her through that just wasn't equipped to do. Equally, he could teach and coach and guide through things I wasn't equipped to do. So, it really was a partnership. And having that conversation with her, I realized she didn't say I was being selfish, but it definitely hit a place in my soul that felt selfish. And it felt like I was choosing my own happiness over kind of this just that we were in as a group. And it felt like I wasn't being a team player, if we're going to kind of just put a global stamp on it. So I abandoned that thought and I was like, okay, we're going to move forward with the move. And at that point, we had gotten Reverie House. Spoiler, if you haven't listened to that episode yet. So we did get Reverie House and we're moving into Reverie House and I am ecstatic. Jane is ecstatic. It's just a dream come true. Was not ecstatic because in his defense, as soon as we moved in, I had already pre-planned a trip to London with my parents a year prior. We had planned it, not knowing all this is going to happen. So I did run out and leave him for 2 weeks on the first 2 weeks we moved in. So that legit was not cool on my part, but as a family divide and conquer, we'd planned the trip and we had spent 5 months prepping for the move. And our professional Jenny, who had done all of our packing and prepping, came with us to the new house to help with the unpacking. And we actually were able to host a party 2 weeks after we moved in. We were able to host a party for his workmates and his colleagues. And that was super cool that we could do that for them and give them that experience and share kind of that part of the journey with them, but also that our house was unpacked and put together. But yeah, so I did totally bail out on with that, and there were a lot of repairs because the house had been vacant for a while before we moved in, and, a house needs to be lived in, a house needs to be tended to, and was always one that took very good care of our house. Every maintenance item was done on time, to the letter. It was d He really took great ownership in home ownership and making sure. So I never went to bed at night and worried, "Is the roof gonna leak tonight?" I never went to bed and worried, "Is the dishwasher gonna overflow?" Well, I guess that could happen, but I never went to bed and worried about the structural maintenance safety of our house because I know that that was something he put great value on, and so he was taking that same approach in our new house, which I know was a big lift for him on everything else. But so we get moved into Reverie, and then we kind of get into the groove of life there. It becomes the party house. It becomes a place where we can all park in the garage, and I'm not worried or people coming through the driveway at night checking our door handles. I didn't worry where Jane was because she was here with her friends hanging out here. I knew that it was a place she could bring people and feel proud of. Because at that same time, we had put her in private school. She had come out of charter school. We'd put her in private school, and when we did that, and I had a very direct conversation that, I don't want her to in any way ever lower her self worth because that's how guys take advantage of girls. Just being straight up, y'all. Okay. If there's a guy listening, you know what happens. And so I wanted her to be able to kind of keep up with the standards. I wanted her to get her nails done like the girls did. I wanted her to wear the clothes like her peers did. I wanted her to have the environment her peers had because I didn't want her in any capacity to ever feel lesser than or that she had to give herself away to anyone to feel like she was involved or included. I wanted her to already be that. And I hope that translates because I'm trying to leave out a lot of vulgar terms. And I'm hoping that translates and that you feel what I'm saying, yeah. And so we fall into a really good groove with just that dynamic in the house. And I fell into a groove of really being roommates. As I mentioned earlier, we never had sex again after that trip to New York. I think, he and I didn't really talk about it, but I was very kind of just triggered by it. And also you can't you can't get to that level of vulnerability, to that level of intimacy with someone that your heart doesn't trust. And towards the end of our time in Reverie before he ultimately left unexpectedly in March, and you can check that podcast out below, there became a heightened interest, a heightened kind of poking at why aren't we having sex? Why aren't we having sex? And I kind of thought to myself, dude, this is our SOP. Like, this is how we operate. Like, we are kind of glorified roommates. We function in a household. We have a child we're raising. We're taking care of handling all these different life things. He had gotten a new job at that point. We're kind of navigating, making sure that all went smoothly. There's just a lot going on that I wasn't even thinking about, sex with him. But he then would kind of just peck, 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 understandably, as a guy would. And I just said the truth as I'm saying it now. My body can't get to that place with someone that my heart doesn't trust. And instead of taking that feedback and saying, "Okay, how can we change things? How can we make it where you do trust me?" That's not what happened. It was just, I think all people, if you receive, I guess that was kind of negative feedback. If you receive negative feedback, your reaction is to lash out versus to say, "Okay, how can we make change? How can we shift?" And a lot of that too was driven by at that time, I was absolutely overwhelmed. I was absolutely just overstimulated and I was undertrained on how to deal with the situation like the marriage I was in at that time. We had a 17-year age difference. We had two very different personalities, but yet we were, I think, a 99% match. I don't want to say 100% match, but I do remember it was up there just because our alignment on the key components that the dating site used because we were on a dating site, used to align us was very high. But what it missed out on was just the soft skills of handling day to day life and handling day to day influences, which is really where we differed. And I think where the rub really started. And so, yeah, our trip to the Northeast with planes, trains, and automobiles was when our relationship really had like the end, if I could say. We'd given up faking. We'd given up well, at least I had given up the hope that it was going to be anything because I had just exhausted all options and just at that point wanted to be a good human, be a good family member, do what I had been put in that position to do, which was to help raise this child and give her the best, most stable life that I could. I wasn't worried about, trying to have sex with my husband.